بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to a new episode from the series where we are discussing the principles of understanding, the principles and the methodology to understand Islam. In the beginning of the series, we said that it is very important for Muslims in general and those Muslims who are living in non-Muslim societies, who are facing challenges from non-Muslims, to understand Al-Islam in a very intellectual way, to understand, to have a deep understanding of Al-Islam. That is very vital. However, brothers and sisters, we said that many young people, they have the zeal to understand Al-Islam, they have a zeal or the zeal to study Al-Islam. But because of a lack of a methodological approach, a systematic approach, a process to study and therefore to understand Al-Islam, they spend so much time, yet they achieve little. That's why we said that the aim of this series is to provide everyone with a process to be followed in order to understand Al-Islam. We mentioned that before approaching anything, if you want to start using any system, you need to follow a systematic approach. And we said that the first thing you need to do is to get the right sources that talk about that system. And then once you get the correct sources, you need to move to the second step, which is to understand those sources correctly. And once you understand those sources correctly, then you can implement what you understood, but you need to have the correct implementation, and the correct implementation is the third step in this process. The correct implementation will lead to a correct understanding, it will lead to a correct belief, and it will lead to a correct practice. We said that those three steps are the same three steps to be followed when we want to understand Al-Islam, as you just have seen in the slide. We need to get the right sources for Al-Islam, and then we need to understand those sources correctly, and once we understood them correctly, we need to put them into practice. We need to implement them. Once we implement them, we will end up with the correct practice of Al-Islam in general, correct belief, having the correct belief about Al-Islam. We also said that let us start, and we said that the main sources of Al-Islam are the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Ijma'. The Quran, the Sunnah, and the Ijma', these are the three main sources of Al-Islam. Before moving to the next step, we need to stop here and discuss those three sources in details. We need to discuss these three sources in details. Before going into the details of each of those sources, we need to ask ourselves a question, and I am sure most of the brothers and sisters watching this program will ask the same question. They will ask, what about aql? What about intellect? What about reason? What about logic? Isn't a source? Why don't we consider it as a source of Al-Islam? What is the relationship between what we understand and what Allah Jalla wa Ala has revealed? Those sources that you have mentioned, which is Quran and Sunnah mainly, is the Wahy, is revelation. And the Ijma' is considered to be a way to understand those sources, and by itself is a source, but the Wahy is the one who told us that this is a source. So it is a complementary, you can say, a source for those textual evidences, or you can say that it is a third textual evidence. We will discuss al-ijma' in details later. Don't worry now about it. But those sources, the three sources, are not including al-aql, or logic, or reason. So what is the relationship between logic, reason, intellect, understanding, our understanding, and those three sources? Here there is a discussion, and we would like to stop here and to clarify this issue a bit more. First of all, once we discuss the role of al-aql in al-Islam, the position of al-aql in al-Islam, maybe you are aware of the allegation by some prominent archbishops and Christians who said that al-Islam is not using reason, who accused al-Islam that it is a religion or a system or a way of life that is different from reason and in contradiction to reason in many places. Is that true? We need to know the reality of this. And that's why, brothers and sisters, please, once we study Islam, we need to study it in a very deep way. This is our religion, and we are responsible before Allah Jalla wa Ala. We are responsible. Why didn't we learn our religion? Why didn't we support our religion? Why didn't we defend our religion? Why didn't we call others for our religion? If we know that it is the truth, then we need to support this religion and we need to spread it. Okay, so what is the position of al-aql in al-Islam? What is the role of al-aql in al-Islam? Is it true that the text is against the aql or the intellect? Is it true that Islam doesn't put much weight for the aql or for the reason? Brothers and sisters, I would like to appeal to you to read Al-Quran carefully and to see what is the position of al-aql in Al-Quran. Have you ever read that Allah Jalla wa Ala condemned al-aql in the Quran? Reason, intellect, or logic in the Quran? Have you ever read that? I challenge anyone to produce one incident or one evidence where Allah Jalla wa Ala said that al-aql is bad, or Allah Jalla wa Ala condemned al-aql, or condemned using al-aql. There is no such thing in the Quran. In contrary, Allah Jalla wa Ala praised those who are using their aql. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. In Surah Al Imran. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار, alteration of day and night, لآيات, signs, clear signs. For who? For those who have albab, for those who have uqul. What does that mean? It means that Allah is telling us, listen, if you have aql, you will see the signs in the creation, and those signs will lead you to believe in Allah Jalla wa Ala. Again, in the Quran, Allah Jalla wa Ala in many places praised those who use their uqul and condemned those who do not use their uqul. In many verses in the Quran, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you think? Don't you use your aql? Don't you use the reason? Don't you use the logic? So, the using aql is something praiseworthy in the Quran, praiseworthy in the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Actually, we are commanded to use our aql. That is very strange. How can we say that we are commanded to use our aql? And many people think that we should not use our aql and we need to stick to that text. Let us break here and we will answer the question after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Welcome back, brothers and sisters. just before the break, we said that you cannot see any single verse that condemns al-aql in the Quran. And we said that Allah Jalla wa Ala commanded us to use al-aql. So if we were commanded to use al-aql, what is this myth about al-aql, where some people say that no, you should not use al-aql, you just need to stick to the text? We have to understand, brothers and sisters, in order to respond to this, we need to understand what do we mean by al-aql. What aql that has been mentioned in the Quran, the intellect, the reason, the logic. Of course, I will not go into much details about the difference between logic, reason, or intellect, because some people say that reason is the correct translation for al-aql, which is mentioned in the Quran. But what I'm talking about is the ability to ponder, is the aql that is mentioned in the Quran. This is what we are talking about. So the aql that is mentioned in the Quran and that is meant in the Quran is the ability to think, the ability to ponder, the ability to understand. And if you look at this, then you will ask yourself a question. How can we implement text? How can we understand a text if we don't have the ability to understand? If we don't use our aql to understand? That is a clear cut. But what is condemned by so many scholars when they say that al-aql, using al-aql, is not from Sharia, or you have to use the text, we have to contextualize what they are talking about. This is very important, otherwise we will go astray in terms of our understanding of al-Islam. What they meant, brothers and sisters, is your personal understanding. And there is a difference between my personal understanding and the aql in general. My personal understanding of something is different from my ability to understand and to think. The ability to understand and ability to think is different from the conclusion that I came up with. And that should be clear. And in many cases, brothers and sisters, the conclusion that I can come up with, or the conclusion that I come up with, is not the pure result of my thinking or using my reason. We have to be careful of that. And once we understand this, then the myth of the contradiction between the text and aql will be cleared and will be clarified. The conclusions that the individuals of human beings come up with, those conclusions are influenced by so many things, including their own aql. So their aql is not the only influential in terms of the conclusions that we come up with. Take, for example, let me give you, brothers and sisters, a very strong and powerful example that I would like all of you to think about it. You know the people who live in deserts, the people who have not seen mobile phones ever in their life. Think if we have some elderly people, or even some people middle age, think of yourself before the technology of mobile phones, before using the technology of mobile phones, before you heard about mobile phones. If someone were to tell you that I saw a person holding a piece of maybe plastic or a piece of metal, and he is talking to other people, would you accept that? You won't accept that. You would say this is rubbish. Imagine a Bedouin from the desert. A Bedouin from the desert. He has never been going through, or he has never been into a city. He has never been into a civilization. He has never been to or exposed to technology. And this person, he visited, maybe he visited London, or he visited New York, or he visited Bombay, one of the main cities in the world. Or let us say that he visited Japan, and he saw that the people there are mad. They are using a piece of metal or a piece of plastic. They are talking through that. And then in the beginning, he won't be able to understand that. He wouldn't be able to comprehend on that. He has to go through many steps to understand what is that. Okay, let us say that this person, he went to his family in the desert. They haven't been exposed to any kind of technology. And he told them, Wallahi, I saw people talking using a piece of metal or a piece of plastic to talk to others. They say, come on, you are crazy. What are you talking about? When they want to talk to others, they are going to use a piece of metal or a piece of plastic or a piece of something like wood. Come on, you are crazy. Are they going to understand that? They are not going to understand that. But if it is explained to them, they will understand it. See? They have the aql to understand. They have the ability to think and to learn. But before thinking, before receiving the proper education, the conclusion that they came up with is not the conclusion of their aql. It is the conclusion of their ability at that moment of time to understand. And it is the ability, again, as I said, the ability of their aql, not the aql, the kulli that the whole mankind own. Because the aql that the whole mankind own is actually the logic. It is undisputable. I hope that is clear. And hence, once we understand that type of aql, we will come up with a conclusion that there is no contradiction between the logic, the reason, and the text. Why? This is a very important question. Why there should be no contradiction between both? The answer is very simple. Why? Allah Jalla wa Ala is the one who reveals the text. And who created the aql? Who created human beings? Allah Jalla wa Ala created them. Who gave them the aql? Allah Jalla wa Ala. Do you think that Allah Jalla wa Ala will reveal something in contradiction to aql? No. Never. Okay, brothers and sisters. Once we say manat al-taklif, once we say that a sane person, he is mukallaf, means he is responsible for what he or she is doing. But an insane person, he is not a mukallaf, means he or she are not responsible for what they do. Is that true or not? Yes, it is true. It means that the aql is the criteria where we can judge whether this person is responsible for his actions or for her action, or he or she are not responsible. In Sharia, the manat means the foundation, the criteria, or one of the foundations or one of the criteria for taklif, for responsibility, is the aql. Let me give you another dalil. Let me give you another proof that Sharia is considering the aql. Once we talk about the aims and objectives of Sharia, all of us heard this term, the aims and objectives of Sharia. And the scholars who talk about that, they said that the first aim is to preserve the religion or the deen. The second aim is to preserve the life. And then they mentioned what? Preservation of aql. Preservation of aql means the Sharia is aiming to preserve our ability to understand, our ability to think. And this is the first type of aql that we have mentioned. We all know Allah Jalla wa Ala made drinking alcohol prohibited. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون. Don't start your prayer while you are intoxicated until you know what you are talking about. Subhanallah. Means being an intoxicated, you won't be able to understand or to think of what you are saying. And that's why the Sharia prohibited that and considered it muskir, kull muskirin khamrun wa kullu khamrin haram, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, each drink that intoxicates, each thing actually, whether it is food or drink or maybe something else that intoxicates, so you become intoxicated that you don't know what you are doing, you don't know what you are saying, means the ability to think is not there anymore. That is prohibited. And because of this, we concluded that the Sharia is very keen to preserve our ability to what? Think and to ponder. Let me summarize what we have discussed before the end of this session. What is the condemned aql? We hear that so many people are condemning aql. We are talking about the aql, which is the conclusion that our individuals came up with. And we call these conclusions as the aql. And that is not really the aql. We said that conclusions we come up with are what? Are influenced by so many factors, including the aql. The aql is not the only criteria that has influenced those conclusions. And remember, brothers and sisters, the example that I have mentioned to you, which is the Bedouin who went to a city. He could understand how people are using mobile phones in general. He went and he explained that to his people who have never been into this experience. In the beginning, they rejected that. And they said that is against aql, that is against reason, that is against logic. No, they are wrong. That is not against logic, that is not against reason, but that is against the conclusion they came up with, which is influenced by their experience, and it is also influenced by what they have went through in their life. That is the aql that is condemned. Once we understand that, brothers and sisters, the myth of the contradiction between aql and naql will be resolved, and there will be no contradiction between both. Let us stop here because we are coming to the end of this episode, and inshallah in the coming episode we are going to talk about another source for Sharia, or let me say another possible source of Sharia. Until then, I would like to ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep us on the right path. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.